The moment I opened my door to find Ellie standing there, mascara streaked down her face and desperation in her eyes, I knew I was about to make a decision that would change everything. What I didn't know was how completely it would transform both our lives. Hey everyone, thanks for clicking on today's story. If you enjoy these real-life tales of unexpected romance and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming content every week. Your support means everything. My name is Daniel Mitchell. 3 years ago, I became a single dad to my daughter Sophie when my wife walked out on us, claiming family life wasn't what she'd signed up for. Since then, it had been just the two of us in our modest two-bedroom apartment on the east side of town. I worked remotely as a graphic designer while juggling school drop-offs, soccer practice, and trying to be both mom and dad to a little girl who deserved the world. Ellie Carson moved into the apartment across the hall 6 months ago. She was everything I wasn't: outgoing, spontaneous, always put together. She worked at a marketing firm downtown and seemed to have the kind of vibrant social life I vaguely remembered from my pre-parenthood days. We exchanged polite hellos in the hallway, and sometimes she would bring in my packages when they were delivered while I was out. That was the extent of our relationship, until that Friday evening in April. I had just put Sophie to bed after our weekly pizza and movie night when the knock came. Through the peephole, I could see Ellie shifting nervously from foot to foot. When I opened the door, the confident woman I was used to seeing was nowhere to be found. Instead, she looked small, vulnerable. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I have a huge favor to ask, and you can absolutely say no." I invited her in, clearing away Sophie's stuffed animals from the couch to make room. As she sat down, I noticed her hands trembling slightly. "My college friends are in town for the weekend," she began. "They've been pressuring me for months about being single. They're all married with perfect lives, and they've been trying to set me up with guys they know." She paused, taking a deep breath. "The thing is, I told them months ago that I was seeing someone serious just to get them off my back. And now they want to meet him." I raised an eyebrow, beginning to see where this was going. "I know this is completely insane," she continued, words tumbling out faster now. "But they're coming over for brunch tomorrow, and I'm desperate. Would you consider pretending to be my boyfriend? Just for a couple of hours?" I should have said no. I had a business proposal due Monday, Sophie's science project needed finishing, and the last thing I needed was to get involved in someone else's drama. But something in her eyes, a mixture of hope and resignation, made me pause. What would this involve exactly? I heard myself asking. Relief flooded her face. "Just brunch at my place. Basic boyfriend stuff, you know, acting like we've been together for a few months. Nothing crazy, I promise." "And Sophie?" "She's welcome too, of course. I'll tell them you're a package deal." "That's actually perfect, they'll see I'm with a responsible guy." I ran a hand through my hair, mentally rearranging my weekend plans. "Okay," I said finally. "But you owe me. Big time." Her smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Thank you, Daniel. You have no idea what this means to me." Little did I know that agreeing to this charade would be the first domino in a series of events that would completely reshape my carefully structured life. The next morning, Sophie was thrilled at the prospect of a pretend party, as she called it. I dressed in my least wrinkled button-down shirt and jeans, trying to look like the kind of man who might date someone like Ellie. Sophie wore her favorite purple dress and insisted on bringing her stuffed unicorn, Mr. Sparkles. "Remember, Soph," I said as we walked across the hall. "This is just pretend, like when we play tea party. Ms. Ellie needs our help today." Sophie nodded solemnly. "I know, Daddy. It's like a movie. If only I'd known what a complicated plot we were stepping into." Ellie opened her door looking stunning in a casual sundress, her apartment transformed with fresh flowers and the smell of something delicious baking. She knelt down to Sophie's level. Thank you for helping me today, Sophie. Your dad is being my hero. Sophie beamed. We're good at pretend. Daddy does all the voices when he reads my stories. Ellie's eyes met mine with genuine warmth. I bet he does. She quickly briefed me on the details of our relationship. We'd been dating for 4 months after meeting in the building's laundry room. I was a graphic designer, true, who loved hiking, false, and jazz music, somewhat true. She'd already told her friends about Sophie, painting me as a devoted father, definitely true. Just be yourself, she said, squeezing my arm. Except, you know, be yourself who happens to be madly in love with me. I laughed, feeling strangely at ease despite the absurdity of the situation. I think I can manage that. Her friends arrived in a flurry of expensive perfume and air kisses. There were 3 couples, Megan and her husband James, Brittany and Tyler, and Jessica with her husband Ryan. They all had that polished look of people whose lives had gone exactly according to plan. So you're the mystery man? Megan exclaimed, looking me up and down with undisguised curiosity. Ellie's been so secretive about you. That's because I wanted to keep him all to myself for a while, Ellie said, sliding her arm through mine with practiced ease. I felt a strange flutter in my chest at her touch but pushed it aside. This was just an act, I reminded myself. Sophie, thankfully, proved to be the perfect distraction, charming everyone with her stories about kindergarten and her extensive knowledge of dinosaurs. I watched with pride as she confidently explained the difference between a Brachiosaurus and a Diplodocus to an amused Tyler. She's amazing, Ellie whispered to me as we moved to the dining table. You've done an incredible job with her. The sincerity in her voice caught me off guard. Thanks, I said. It hasn't always been easy, but she's worth every second. Brunch progressed smoothly, with Ellie and I falling into a surprisingly comfortable rhythm. When she mentioned how I'd helped her hang shelves in her apartment, I countered with a story about how she'd rescued me when Sophie had a fever and I couldn't find the children's Tylenol. We weren't lying, exactly, these things had happened, just not in the context of a romantic relationship. So how did you know Ellie was the one? Jessica asked, leaning forward with interest. I froze momentarily, but then looked at Ellie, who was watching me with curious eyes. Something shifted in that moment, a strange, electric connection that hadn't been there before. I think it was the 3rd time I saw her, I said slowly, surprising myself with the words coming out of my mouth. She was helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries up the stairs because the elevator was broken. She didn't know I was watching, but I saw how gentle she was, how patient. And I remember thinking that's the kind of person I want in my life, someone with a kind heart. A flush spread across Ellie's cheeks, and I realized with a start that the story was true. I had seen her helping Mrs. Abernathy with groceries, and I had admired her for it. Daniel's being modest, Ellie said, her voice slightly husky. He doesn't mention that 2 days later, during that big thunderstorm, he showed up at my door with hot chocolate because he remembered me mentioning I was afraid of storms. That had happened too, though I'd brought the hot chocolate for Mrs. Abernathy and simply made extra when I saw Ellie's lights on late at night. The rest of brunch passed in a blur of conversation and laughter. Sophie fell asleep on Ellie's couch during dessert, clutching Mr. Sparkles. I found myself relaxing, genuinely enjoying the company and the elaborate fiction we were creating. When her friends finally left, promising to get together again soon, Ellie closed the door behind them and leaned against it with a sigh of relief. We did it, she said, grinning. They completely bought it. I carefully lifted the sleeping Sophie into my arms. We make a pretty good team. The best, she agreed, her eyes lingering on mine a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, Daniel. Seriously. Anytime, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Back in our apartment, I tucked Sophie into bed, my mind replaying moments from the day. The way Ellie's hand had felt in mine. The sound of her laugh when I told a particularly bad dad joke. The look in her eyes when I talked about why I admired her. It was just pretend, I told myself firmly. A favor for a neighbor. Nothing more. But something had shifted between us, something I couldn't quite name yet. The following week, Ellie knocked on our door with homemade cookies as a thank you. Sophie invited her to stay for dinner, and somehow that became a regular thing, Ellie joining us for meals a couple times a week. She'd help Sophie with her reading while I cooked, or sometimes she'd bring takeout when she knew I had a deadline. We fell into an easy friendship, the pretense of our fake relationship fading into the background. Until 3 weeks later, when Ellie received a wedding invitation from Brittany and Tyler. "They've invited all 3 of us," she said, showing me the elegant card with its gold embossing. Plus 1 Daniel Mitchell and daughter. I stared at the invitation, reality crashing back. "Ellie, we can't keep this up. A whole wedding weekend? That's a different level of deception." She bit her lip. "I know. I'll just tell them we broke up." "And then what?" "They'll try to set you up with someone else, and we'll be back where we started." "It's fine," she said, but her expression said otherwise. "I'll handle it." Later that night, after Sophie was asleep, I found myself knocking on Ellie's door. "Why did you make up a boyfriend in the first place?" I asked when she let me in. "You're beautiful, successful, kind. You could have any guy you wanted." She gestured for me to sit on the couch, curling up at the opposite end with her legs tucked under her. "It's complicated. I've got time." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. 2 years ago, I was engaged. His name was Mark. We'd been together since college, had the whole future planned out. Then 3 months before the wedding, I found out he'd been cheating with his coworker. My chest tightened with anger on her behalf. "I'm sorry." "It wasn't just the cheating," she continued. "It was realizing our entire relationship had been built on me molding myself into what he wanted. I lost myself completely." She gave a hollow laugh. "My friends were so supportive at first, but then came the constant check-ins, the setups with nice guys, the pitying looks. I couldn't take it anymore." "So you invented a boyfriend? Pathetic, right?" I moved closer, taking her hand. "Not pathetic. Human." She looked down at our joined hands. "The thing is, Daniel, I've enjoyed these past few weeks more than I've enjoyed anything in a long time. Not just the pretending, but the real stuff, dinners with you and Sophie, movie nights, just talking." My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure she could hear it. "Me too. So maybe." She hesitated, vulnerability written across her face. "Maybe we don't have to pretend anymore." Time seemed to stand still as I processed her words. Was she suggesting what I thought she was? "Ellie," I said carefully. "Are you asking me to be your actual boyfriend?" She nodded, a mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. "Unless that's completely crazy?" I thought about Sophie, about the careful life I'd built for us, about the walls I'd constructed after my ex-wife left. And then I thought about how easily Ellie had slipped past those defenses, how natural she felt in our lives. "It's not crazy," I said finally. "But we'd need to take it slow. Sophie has to be my priority." "Of course," she said quickly. "Sophie will always come first. I adore her, you know that. And we'd need to be honest with your friends eventually." She grimaced. "That conversation is going to be awkward." "We'll handle it together," I said, surprising myself with how right the words felt. Slowly, carefully, I leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, questioning, but the spark between us was undeniable. When we pulled apart, she was smiling. "So that's a yes." "That's a yes," I confirmed. The transition from pretend to real relationship was both easier and harder than I expected. Easier because in many ways, we'd already been building something genuine. Harder because now there were real stakes, real feelings that could be hurt. We decided to be honest with Sophie right away. I sat her down the next day and explained that Ms. Ellie and I liked each other very much, and we were going to start dating for real. Sophie considered this information with the seriousness only a 6-year-old can muster. "But you already liked each other," she said, confused. "Yes, but now it's different," I tried to explain. "Before we were just friends, now we're more than friends." She nodded sagely. "Like Princess Tiana and Prince Naveen. They were friends first too." I smiled, relieved at her easy acceptance. "Something like that. Does this mean Ms. Ellie will come to my dance recital?" "If you want her to." Sophie beamed. "Good. She promised to help me with my hair." As for Ellie's friends, we decided to come clean at the wedding. It was a beautiful ceremony at a vineyard outside the city. Sophie was entranced by the flowers and the bride's princess dress, while I was nervous about the confession we planned to make. During the reception, we gathered Ellie's friends and told them the truth, that our relationship had started as a pretense but had become real along the way. There was a moment of stunned silence, then Megan burst out laughing. "Are you serious? That's straight out of a romantic comedy. You're not mad?" Ellie asked, squeezing my hand tightly. "Mad? Honey, this is the best story ever," Jessica said. "And honestly, watching you two together, there's no way anyone would think you're faking it." Relief washed over us both. The rest of the evening, we danced and celebrated, no longer burdened by our secret. Sophie twirled on the dance floor with the flower girl, and I held Ellie close during the slow songs, marveling at how perfectly she fit in my arms. "See? Nothing to worry about," she whispered. "I should never have doubted you," I replied, kissing her forehead. The months that followed were a gradual blending of our lives. Ellie started keeping a toothbrush at our place. I cleared out a drawer for her things. Sophie began referring to us as my family when talking to her friends at school. There were challenges, of course. Our first real argument happened when Ellie got offered a promotion that would require occasional travel. I panicked, memories of my ex-wife's complaints about feeling trapped by family life surfacing unexpectedly. "This isn't the same situation, Daniel," Ellie said firmly when I finally admitted my fears. "I'm not her. And I'm not trying to replace her either. I'm just me, loving you and Sophie exactly as you are." Those words, "loving you," hung in the air between us. It was the first time either of us had used that word. "You love us?" I asked quietly. Her expression softened. "Of course I do. How could I not?" That night, after we'd made up properly, I watched her sleeping beside me and realized how completely my life had transformed in the span of 6 months. From a carefully controlled existence focused entirely on Sophie's well-being to this messy, complicated, wonderful new reality where my heart was once again vulnerable but so much fuller. On Sophie's 7th birthday, Ellie helped me organize a dinosaur-themed party that was the talk of the 2nd grade. As we cleaned up afterward, Sophie asleep amid a pile of new toys, Ellie turned to me with an uncertain expression. "I've been thinking," she said, fiddling with a deflated balloon. "My lease is up next month." My heart skipped. Oh. And it seems silly to keep paying rent on a place I barely use anymore. I stepped closer, taking the balloon from her nervous fingers. "Are you asking to move in with us?" I said, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside me. She nodded, suddenly looking vulnerable. "Only if you and Sophie are ready." I know it's a big step. I thought about how seamlessly she had integrated into our lives, how Sophie ran to her with skin knees and school stories, how the apartment felt emptier on the rare nights she spent at her own place. "I think we're ready," I said. "More than ready." The smile that lit up her face was worth any uncertainty I might have felt. That weekend, we told Sophie over pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. "So Ms. Ellie won't have to go home anymore?" Sophie asked, maple syrup dripping down her chin. "That's right," I confirmed. "She'll live here with us." Sophie considered this for approximately 3 seconds before declaring, "Good. Now she can read me bedtime stories every night, not just sometimes." Ellie's eyes met mine across the table, shining with unshed tears of happiness. "Every night," she promised Sophie. Moving Ellie in was surprisingly simple. She didn't have much furniture, most of her apartment had come furnished, and she'd always lived minimally. Still, our modest two-bedroom felt suddenly smaller with her books mingling with mine on the shelves, her clothes hanging beside mine in the closet, her special tea mugs joining our mismatched collection. "We might need a bigger place eventually," I admitted one night as we tried to find space for her collection of vintage cameras. "Eventually," she agreed. "But this is perfect for now." Perfect wasn't quite accurate. We had adjustments to make. Ellie was a morning person who liked to exercise before dawn. I was a night owl who did my best design work after midnight. She was meticulously organized. I had what she kindly called a creative filing system. She'd never lived with a child before and was still learning the rhythms of parenting. But we figured it out, day by day. We created new routines, new traditions. Sunday morning pancakes. Wednesday night board games. Monthly adventure days, where we'd explore somewhere new in the city. 6 months after Ellie moved in, I found myself in a jewelry store during my lunch break, staring at rows of engagement rings and wondering if I was rushing things. We'd been officially together for just over a year, though sometimes it felt like she'd always been part of our lives. "When you know," the elderly jeweler told me with a knowing smile as I hesitated between 2 rings. And I did know. I knew that Ellie was the person I wanted beside me through all of life's moments, big and small. I knew that Sophie adored her and that Ellie loved Sophie as if she were her own. I knew that our little family, unconventional as its beginnings had been, was exactly right. I chose a vintage-style emerald ring that reminded me of Ellie's eyes and carried it around for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. In the end, the moment found me. It was an ordinary Tuesday evening. Sophie was building a fort in the living room, sheets draped over chairs and couch cushions repurposed as walls. Ellie was helping, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing one of my old t-shirts and laughing as Sophie directed operations with the seriousness of a 5-star general. "Daddy, we need more pillows," Sophie called when she spotted me watching from the doorway. "Coming right up," I said, gathering pillows from the bedroom. When I returned, Sophie had declared the fort complete and was inviting Ellie for a royal tea party inside. I watched as Ellie crawled into the makeshift structure, careful not to disturb any of the precariously balanced sheets. "Aren't you joining us, Daddy?" Sophie called. I ducked into the fort, the 3 of us squished together in the small space illuminated by the flashlight Sophie had placed in the center like a campfire. "This is the best fort ever," Ellie declared solemnly. "It's our castle," Sophie corrected. "And you're the queen, and Daddy's the king, and I'm the princess." Ellie's eyes met mine over Sophie's head, warm with love and contentment. And suddenly I knew this was the moment, not a fancy restaurant or scenic overlook, but here in this pillow fort with the 2 people I loved most in the world. "Actually," I said, reaching into my pocket where I'd been carrying the ring box for days, "if Ellie's going to be the queen, there's something I need to ask her first." Sophie's eyes widened as I produced the small velvet box. Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. "Daniel," she whispered. "I had a whole speech planned," I admitted, "about how you transformed our lives when you knocked on our door that day. But I think it's simpler than that." I opened the box, revealing the emerald ring nestled inside. "Ellie Carson, we love you. Sophie and I both do. Will you marry me and make our family official?" Tears spilled down Ellie's cheeks as she nodded, too overcome to speak for a moment. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Sophie clapped her hands in delight as I slipped the ring onto Ellie's finger. "Does this mean I can call you Mom now?" she asked Ellie. Ellie looked at me, questioning. This was something we hadn't discussed. That's up to you, Soph, I said carefully. Ellie won't replace your mom, but she is going to be your stepmom, which is a kind of mom too. Sophie considered this with her characteristic seriousness. I think I'll call you Mom Ellie, she decided. Because you're Ellie, but you're also my mom now. Fresh tears filled Ellie's eyes as she pulled Sophie into a tight hug. Mom Ellie sounds perfect, she whispered. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony in the city park where we'd had our first official date. Sophie was our flower girl, scattering rose petals with dramatic flair. Mrs. Abernathy, our elderly neighbor who'd unwittingly played a role in bringing us together, sat in the front row dabbing at her eyes. I knew it from the beginning, she told us at the reception. The way you two looked at each other in the hallway, it was just a matter of time. Ellie's friends, now our friends, toasted to the best fake relationship that turned real. My parents, who had fallen in love with Ellie the moment they met her, welcomed her officially to the family. It wasn't the life I had planned. After my divorce, I'd resigned myself to being alone, focusing all my energy on giving Sophie the stability and love she deserved. I never expected to find someone who would love both of us so completely, who would fit so perfectly into the spaces of our lives. 2 years after that fateful knock on my door, our family grew again with the birth of our son, James. Sophie, now 9, took her role as big sister with the same determination she approached everything in life, reading to her baby brother and solemnly explaining the world to him. And that's how Mom Ellie became part of our family, I overheard her telling him one day as he gurgled in his bouncer. She pretended to be Daddy's girlfriend, but then they fell in love for real. Just like in the stories. Ellie caught my eye from across the room, both of us smiling at Sophie's simplified version of events. She's not wrong, Ellie said later that night as we lay in bed, James finally asleep after his midnight feeding. It is like a story. The best kind, I agreed, pulling her close. The kind with a happy ending. She rested her head on my chest, her breathing synchronizing with mine. Not an ending, she corrected softly. A beginning. And she was right. What started as a desperate favor between neighbors had become the beginning of something beautiful, a family forged not from obligation or convention, but from choice and love. Every day, I'm grateful for that knock on my door, for the courage to say yes to something unexpected, and for the woman who showed me that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unlikely beginnings. So if you're watching this and waiting for your own unexpected beginning, remember that love often finds us when we least expect it. Sometimes it's right across the hall, just waiting for you to open the door. If you enjoyed this story of how a simple favor changed everything, please hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming real-life tales. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all that second chances and new beginnings are always possible, no matter where you are in your journey.